Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In this edition, we bring to you the story of the circumstances of the death of General Sani Abacha, Nigeria's military head of state who was in power from 17th November 1993 when he seized the reins of office from Ernest Shonekan to 8th June 1998 when he passed on to the great beyond. Welcome to this episode of your channel, and do remember to subscribe to the channel and share the stories with friends and loved ones. Sani Abacha was a general in the Nigerian army. Abacha had seen several stages of Nigeria's history and development, and is even said to have participated actively in all the successful military coups in Nigeria from the counter coup of July 1966 down to the last military coup which took place in 1993, where he emerged as the military head of state of Nigeria. At some point in the history of Nigeria, Abacha was a kingmaker. He was a very patient military officer who was not in a hurry to make himself president, but he had his eyes on the presidency, and when the time became ripe for him in 1993, he toppled interim President Ernest Shonekan and announced himself as the military head of state of Nigeria. He went on to rule till June 1998, when he died in office. His death gave rise to many theories. A certain theory said that he was poisoned to death by Indian women of easy virtue who are said to have been imported into Aso Rock Villa for Abacha's pleasure. There is also the theory that says that he was killed by a close friend, a military officer in whom Abacha had so much trust and confidence. The said friend has since distanced himself from the allegations. There is also the theory that said that he was killed by operatives that came to Nigeria a day before in the entourage of Yasser Arafat. There is also the theory that he died of cardiac arrest. Another theory said that he died of natural causes. Whatever the truth may be, what is indisputable is the fact that General Sani Abacha died in the wee hours of 9th June 1998 and left this world to the great beyond. This marked the end of the life of Nigeria's most feared and most dreaded military head of states. Perhaps the version of the story as told by Major Al-Mustafa, Abacha's chief security officer, might be the most reliable version of the story of Abacha's death. Al-Mustafa being the last man that saw him while alive and the first man that saw his lifeless body. In an interview granted to Chuks Okocha of the This Day newspaper with the title How Abacha Died, Al-Mustafa's version of the story is, in quotes, as follows. The sudden collapse of the health system of Abacha started on June 7, 1998 at the Abuja International Airport, immediately after one of the security personnel who accompanied Yasser Arafat of Palestine shook hands with him. He continued, "Shortly after the handshake, I noticed the change in the countenance of Abacha, and I immediately informed the ADC, Lieutenant Colonel Abdullah, who advised that we keep close watch on him. Later in the evening, his doctor came around and administered injection on him. He was then advised to have a short rest." End of quote. He went further to say, still in quote, "I left the villa and went back home to rest. At about 5 a.m., the security guards ran to my quarters to inform me that Abacha was very unstable. I ran to the guest house of the head of state. When I got to his bedside, he was already gasping for breath. I immediately called Abacha's personal physician, Dr. Wali, who arrived at the villa in 8 minutes and gave Oga 2 doses of injection, one at the heart and another on the neck. This did not work. The head of state at this time had turned very cold. The doctor then told me that the head of state was dead." Al-Mustafa added, still in quote, "The story that my boss died on women is not true. It is a great lie. The story that my boss ate poisoned apple is also not true." End of quote. Telephone calls were made to several VIPs in the military at the time, including the army chiefs and former military heads of state, on what should be the next line of action. An emergency meeting was convened at daybreak and deliberations were made on who becomes the next head of state and to discuss the modalities for the burial of Abacha. In the end, General Sani Abacha was selected as the new head of state. Al-Mustafa later granted other interviews discussing the day Abacha died. In his interview published by africatelegram.com and also published by nairaland.com, Al-Mustafa narrates the same story more elaborately as follows, in quotes. Contrary to insinuations, speculations, and sad rumors initiated by some sections of the society, I maintain that the sudden collapse of the health system of the late head of state started the previous day, Sunday 7th June 1998, right from the Abuja International Airport, immediately after one of the white security operatives and personnel who accompanied President Yasser Arafat of Palestine shook hands with him, General Abacha. I had noticed the change in the countenance of the late Commander-in-Chief and informed the aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Colonel Abdullah, accordingly. He however advised that we keep a close watch on the head of states. Later in the evening of 8 June 1998, around 6 p.m., his doctor came around, administered an injection to stabilize him. He was advised to have a short rest. Happily enough, by 9 p.m., the head of state was bouncing and receiving visitors until much later when General Jeremiah Timbot Useni, the then Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, came calling. He was fond of the head of states. They were very good friends. End of quote. He continued still in quote. They, Abacha and Useni, stayed and chatted together till about 3:35 a.m. A friend of the house was with me in my office, and as he was bidding me farewell, he came back to inform me that the FCT Minister General Useni was out of the head of state's guest house within the villa. I then decided to inform the ADC and other security boys that I would be on my way home to prepare for the early morning event at the International Conference Center. Al-Mustafa continued still in quote. At about 5 a.m., the security guards ran to my quarters to inform me that the head of state was very unstable. At first, I thought it was a coup attempt. Immediately, I prepared myself fully for any eventuality. As an intelligence officer and the chief security officer to the head of state for that matter, I devised a means of diverting the attention of the security boys from my escape route by asking my wife to continue chatting with them at the door. She was in the house while the boys were outside. From there, I got to the guest house of the head of state before them. When I got to the bedside of the head of state, he was already gasping. Ordinarily, I could not just touch him. It was not allowed in our job. But under the situation on ground, I knelt close to him and shouted, "General Sani Abacha, sir, please grant me permission to touch and carry you." I again knocked on the stool beside the bed and shouted in the same manner, yet he did not respond. I then realized that there was a serious danger. I immediately called the head of state's personal physician, Dr. Wali, who arrived to the place under 8 minutes from his house. End of quote. Al-Mustafa continued still in quote. Dr. Wali immediately gave Oga 2 doses of injection, one at the heart and another close to his neck. This did not work, apparently as the head of state had turned very cold. He then told me that the head of state was dead and nothing could be done after all. I there and then asked the personal physician to remain with the dead body while I dashed out to be fully prepared for the problems that might arise from the incident. As soon as I informed my wife, she collapsed and burst into tears. I secured my house and then ran back. Al-Mustafa went on to say, still in quote, at that time the ADC to the head of state had been contacted by me, and we decided that great caution must be taken in handling the grave situation. Again, I must reiterate that the issue of my boss dying on top of women was a great lie, just as the insinuation that General Sani Abacha ate and died of poisoned apples was equally a wicked lie. My question is, did Chief MK Abiola die of poisoned apples, or did he die on top of women? As I had stated at the Oputa panel, their deaths were organized, pure and simple. He continued, still in quotes, "It was at this point that I used our special communication gadgets to diplomatically invite the service chiefs, military governors, and some few elements purportedly to a meeting with the head of state by 9 a.m. at the council chamber. That completed, I also decided to talk to some former leaders of the nation to inform them that General Sani Abacha would like to meet them by 9 a.m. The situation became charged, however, when one of the service chiefs, Lieutenant General Ishaya Rizi Bameyi, who pretended to be with us, suggested he be made the new head of state after we had quietly informed him of the death of General Sani Abacha. He even suggested we should allow him access to Chief Abiola. We smelt a rat, and other heads of security agencies on hearing this advised I moved Chief Abiola to a safer destination. I managed to do this in spite of the fact that I had been terribly overwhelmed by the crisis at hand. He continued, still in quotes, "When some junior officers overheard the suggestion of one of the service chiefs earlier mentioned, it was suggested to me that we should finish all the members of the Provisional Ruling Council and give the general public an excuse that there was a meeting of the Provisional Ruling Council during which a shootout occurred between some members of the Provisional Ruling Council and the bodyguards of the head of states. When I sensed that we would be contending with far more delicate issues than the one on ground, I talked to Generals Buba Marwa and Ibrahim Sabo, who both promptly advised us, the junior officers, against any bloodshed. They advised that we should contact General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, former military president, who equally advised against any bloodshed, but that we should support the most senior officer in the Provisional Ruling Council to be the new head of state. Al-Mustafa went on to say, still in quote, "Since the words of our elders are words of wisdom, we agreed to support General Jeremiah Hosseini. Along the line, General Bameyi lampooned me, saying, 'Can't you put 2 and 2 together to be 4? Has it not occurred to you that General Hosseini, who was the last man with the head of state, might have poisoned him, knowing fully well that he was the next most senior officer in the Provisional Ruling Council?' Naturally, I became furious with General Hosseini. A decision was then taken to storm General Hosseini's house with almost a battalion of soldiers to effect his arrest. Again, some heads of security units and agencies, including my wife, advised against the move." End of quote. He went on to say, still in quote, "The next most senior person and officer in government was General Abdul Salami Abubakar, who was the then Chief of Defense Staff. We rejected the other service chief, whom we believed was too ambitious and destructive. We settled for General Abubakar, and about 6 of us called him inside a room in the head of state's residence to break the news of the death of General Sani Abacha to him. As a general with vast experience, Abdul Salami Abubakar humbly requested to see and pray for the soul of General Sani Abacha, which we allowed him. Do we consider this a mistake? Because right there, he, Abubakar, went and sat on the seat of the late head of state. Again, I was very furious. Like I said at the Oputa panel, if caution was not applied, I would have gunned him down. The revolution the boys were yearning for would have started right there. The assumption that we could not have succeeded in the revolution was a blatant lie. We were in full control of the State House and the Brigade of Guards. We had loyal troops in Kefi and in some other areas surrounding the seat of government in Abuja. But I allowed peace to reign because we believed it would create further crises in the country. Al Mustafa then said, still in quote, "We followed the advice of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida and the wise counsel of some loyal senior officers and jointly agreed that General Abdul Salami Abubakar be installed as the head of state, commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces immediately after the burial of General Sani Abacha in Kano." End of quotes. On his part, Oji Ogbonnaya Oji, Radio Nigeria State House correspondent at the time, has stated in his book, Inside Aso Rock, that what followed was the conveyance of Abacha's body to Abacha's hometown in Kano for burial in the evening hours. Oji noted at page 145 of his book that, quote, "We had already boarded the aircraft and almost getting set to take off when General Abdul Salami Abubakar curiously asked, 'Where is the body?' He was told that the body was in the hold. 'No, no, no, bring it out,' the general commanded." The author continued, still in quote, "The corpse, which was not in a casket, was brought inside the plane and kept few seats away from where I sat. As the journey progressed, whenever there was turbulence, the body would shake, exposing the legs, which were partially covered. I sat in the aircraft speechless. My reflections were on life, death, power, influence, and the vanity of human desires." End of quote. Oji Ogbonnaya Oji continued, still in quote, "The presidential jet touched down in Kano and the remains of the head of state was conveyed in a motorcade to the Kano Central Mosque and then to his family compound, and the body was laid in the Abacha family mosque and then committed to Mother Earth in accordance with Islamic rites. The burial ended at about 10:05 p.m. His death and burial brought to an end an era in the post-colonial history of Nigeria." End of quotes. To some Nigerians, Abacha was a good man. To others, he was a brutal dictator. He was loved by many and also hated by many. He was a no-nonsense general. He was powerful and largely feared by many, including those in uniform with him. He was the most protected person in Nigeria at the time, but death, being what it is, with centuries of superiority over man, snatched Abacha, a sitting military head of state, at a time it was least expected. Abacha was born on November 20, 1943 and was 55 years old when he died suddenly in 1998. He was from Kano State, though some persons hold the opinion that he was from Borno State. He lived and grew up in Kano, and when he died, his remains were buried in Kano. The Global Information Storehouse Wikipedia records his cause of death as, quote, "disputed." Abacha joined the military in 1963 and was commissioned as a lieutenant, and from there he rose through the ranks to become a full-fledged general. Unlike his colleagues that were close to power, Abacha did not skip any rank from lieutenant to general. He was General Babangida's right-hand man and most trusted ally throughout Babangida's 8-year stay in power as the military leader. Abacha was survived by a wife, Mariam Abacha, and together they had 8 children. His death remains shrouded in mystery even till this day. Thanks for watching this edition of your favorite channel, Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page and be the first to receive notifications on every new video posted to the page. I am your friend and host, Ekemini Udim, wishing you the best of time in all you do.